In the last episode of the $100 flip-up challenge, I showcased a massive parts haul, which might have been one of the best deals I've ever gotten on used PC parts. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend checking out episode 4. Today, I'm only building one system, but hopefully in the next episode I can go all out and complete and sell 2 more builds for big profit. I did manage to sell the MSI Aero GTX 1050 for $40, which leaves me with $170 to finish off this build. For this system, I centered it around the Ryzen 7 2700 from that big parts bundle. It's an older Zen 1 processor with 8 cores and 16 threads, but with a base clock of 3.2 GHz and a turbo of 4.1 GHz, it's solid for a used build. Plus, I found that Ryzen 7s and i7s tend to sell much faster and better than their lower tier counterparts, even if they're not always the best CPU available for that platform. To house the Ryzen 7, I decided to use the MSI B350M Bazooka instead of the Strix B450 board that I had, since I have some bigger plans for that Strix motherboard. I also picked up a budget Cooler Master AM4 cooler for $8.56 on eBay, and I'll be using one of my many 16GB Corsair LPX kits from the surplus of RAM that I have on hand. For storage, I scored a 512GB M.2 SSD for just under $30 on Amazon. I also opted for the Darkrock A8M ATX case, which I got brand new for just over $50 on Amazon as well. I could have gone with several other cases at a similar price or reused the trusty Q300L for the 3rd time in the series, but I wanted to try something new. The A8M has excellent airflow, a tempered glass side panel that swivels open, and a compact ATX design that doesn't make the MATX board that I have in it look out of place. It comes with 2 standard black fans and an ARGB fan, though the ARGB isn't compatible with this motherboard. If I have trouble selling the system, I might invest in a controller hub and possibly swap the front fans for more RGB, but for now I'm sticking with the stock setup. For the GPU, I went with the Radeon RX 5700, which I featured in the last episode. It's a solid all-around 1080p card that I actually made a more in-depth video on a few weeks ago. To power the system, I opted for the Thermaltake GX1 600W power supply, which I got bundled with the RX 5700. It's more than enough to run this build and should easily support a few future upgrades. After installing Windows 10 and the latest graphics drivers from AMD, I tested a few games on the system to ensure everything was running smoothly and to gather performance data for potential buyers. As I mentioned earlier, I did test the RX 5700 in a video a few weeks back, and the results here are pretty similar, especially in less CPU intensive games. First up, I ran Fortnite in DX12 at 1080p using the high quality preset. Over the course of a match, the system averaged 127 FPS with some occasional spikes and a few unnoticeable drops. There were also a couple of major stutters, but nothing out of the ordinary. In Cyberpunk 2077, I used the built-in benchmark at 1080p on high settings, which delivered a solid 63 FPS average. Actual in-game performance was quite similar with an average of 65 FPS during a fairly long test run. Lastly, I tested the system using the Black Myth Wukong benchmark at 1080p with high settings and FSR set to 67% render resolution. The system delivered a very stable 83 FPS average. While this build isn't flashy, it's got some solid specs for 1080p gaming, and I should be able to sell it for a decent profit. Right now, I have just under $80 in cash on hand, plus a lot of extra parts to work with moving forward. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I'm aiming to complete 2 more builds in the next episode using up most of my parts pool. After that, I might start exploring higher end, more modern components like current gen platforms and GPUs from RDNA 3 or Lovelace. If you want to see what's coming next, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any build recommendations or ideas for other content, feel free to drop a comment. Thanks for watching.